Roger and Avery were famous. Well, in their heads. Were they famous in reality? No. But if it feels real, don't that make it so? The store was Video Valley, located in Manhattan Beach, California. It was a small, independent video rental store that specialized in a wide range of obscure, cult, and hard-to-find films. It had a unique and eclectic atmosphere, with shelves full of classic films, foreign cinema, exploitation movies, horror, sci-fi, and other genres that weren't typically found in mainstream rental stores, such as Blockbuster. It took pride in that, not being Blockbuster. It exuded an attitude that said, movies matter. Holding those megaphones were Roger and Avery. The year was 1983. Roger started first, a fact which he would hold over Avery anytime their love of cinema hit a standstill. It was like a twin bragging that they were 10 seconds older than their younger sibling. They formed an unbreakable bond. For their whole lives, there was a part of them that thought their love of film might be weird, that it was unhealthy for someone to love movies this much. Normal people spend time with other people, not imaginary characters, but then they met their match in one another. Holding up a mirror to your enthusiasm on a daily basis was a blessing. Movies were their religion. Video Village was their church. Their debates did not solely take place in off hours. In fact, they quite relished arguing in front of customers. They saw this as almost performative theater. They wanted to put on a good show for the people in their store because they thought it would enhance the whole experience and make them even more excited about finding the perfect movie for that moment. They saw themselves as more than just clerks. They saw themselves as doctors who were prescribing cinema, the proper dose of the correct film to cure what ailed you. It was as if you were being sized up the moment you walked into the store. Above anything else, it was of the utmost importance that the customer never felt as though they had to school Roger and Avery on movies. Oh no, Roger and Avery were the teachers. This was in fact the closest that either of them ever been to film school, which was more than fine with them since neither had even graduated high school. Both of them had grown up with fairly estranged family situations. Roger was adopted. Even though his family treated him well enough, he always felt a sense of isolation that seemed to magnify during his teen years. He felt like a bit of an outsider, even in his own home, which never really felt like home. His escape was movies. Invading a world that felt foreign. That was comfortable to him. Avery was raised by his single mother, who had him at the age of 16. He was very close with his mom, but never knew his dad. Both men had grown up without fathers, and they were more than willing to acknowledge the fact that movies were their daddy. By the time Avery had finished his first year at Video Village, both of them have developed an almost encyclopedic knowledge of film. The store's vast collection was a perfect resource for the pair, and they would often discuss and dissect movies in great detail into the wee hours. Whether alone or with other friends, of which there were few, they had interesting looks. Roger had a surfer haircut, blonde and wavy. Avery had an emerging fro with a slippery Fu Manchu. Jeans and t-shirts for the weekdays, Hawaiian shirts for the weekends. This was not a well-paying job, but the money was of zero significance. This place offered them the chance to be the cool kids for once. This was their school cafeteria, and they ran it how they saw fit, which was to live inside the history of cinema, one flick at a time. They were both on the cusp of 21 and thought they had discovered heaven. This was it, their pearly gates. And then they got an offer from a real cool cat named Kurt.
Heart is jumping, feeling alive tonight. Engine roaring, the moon's our spotlight. Top down, ladies laughing, feel it's alright.
Kurt had a twang. He had a swashbuckling swagger that felt like something you'd find in a Sergio Leone film. That was Roger's take. Avery said Kurt was more of a John Ford fella. This debate lasted roughly 3 hours. There was no conclusion to their argument. There rarely was. But they both agreed beyond a shadow of a doubt that Kurt was a character. Manhattan Beach had its fair share of characters, no doubt, but Kurt was not one of them. Each slice of the Kurt pie felt unique. He had a cowboy hat, but no cowboy boots. He spoke with a southern accent, but wore cargo shorts. His light beard was red, but his hair was black. He limped on his left side, but wrote with his right hand. You couldn't trace his map. That's how Avery described him. Everything about him seemed inconsistent, yet the whole of the man, with his booming Kentucky drawl, was pure, uncut magnetism. The first time he walked into Video Village, Roger and Avery quickly locked eyes, silently daring, as if to say, who should take this one? Roger leapt off the glass counter and took a couple strolls. Both Roger and Avery prided themselves on slightly mimicking the mannerisms and eccentricities of their customers. They felt it was a good way to make the customer feel at home. If you got either of them buzzed enough, 9 times out of 10, they would tell you that they could have gone into acting, but they would rather be behind the camera. New customers were a showcase for their new ideas. They both kept notebooks in their back pockets and would routinely write down ideas, lines, people, stories, anything that might come in handy down the road once they made their first of many movies. They had stacks of these skinny jean notebooks, filled with gold, at least in their mind. I'm looking for a movie I could watch with a lady. This is what Kurt told Roger. Roger did what he usually does, which is smile wide, nod, and rub his chin. The rush of chasing down the perfect picture for the customer to watch was intoxicating. Better than any drug they had tried up to this point. Better than any movie? They couldn't go that far. But that initial rush, man, when you try to find the perfect horse for a new cowboy that sails into town, bliss. Roger told Kurt that they had a whole section of movies that ladies love. My lady's a little particular. Roger nodded again, approvingly, and then told him the good ones usually are. Not that Roger really knew. He had had one girlfriend up until this point, and it lasted a whopping 6 weeks. Avery had not fared much better with the ladies. His longest love stint was 3 months. At this specific moment, he was supposed to be checking out a customer who was on the verge of renting Rabid, one of David Cronenberg's earliest flicks. It was at the urging of Avery that this customer took the bait and went rabid, even though he had entered Video Village in search of something comedic. Avery finessed the wants of this particular customer into a Cronenberg state of mind. He had a knack for that, at least while inside the warm confines of Video Village. Outside of the store, his confidence would take a plunge. This was part of the reason Roger and Avery spent so much time together. You always look better when the mirror is smiling. Let me tell you about a little picture called The Way We Were. Now, you might look at this and get a little seasick, all right? But this movie's not all rainbows and cotton candy. Yeah, you've got Streisand and Redford, but you've also got Sidney Pollack, all right? Pollack doesn't want cotton candy. It might taste good. There might be a little sugar in it, but it ain't all cotton candy, all right? This movie's got a little bite. Kurt tilted his head back to get a better look at the cover. I think you might be right, partner. I think my little lady will take a shine to this one. Let me know what she thinks, all right? Come back and we can kick the can some more. Roger led Kurt towards the register so Avery could check him out. He was trying to play it cool, even though Roger was doing a celebratory dance right behind him in the hopes that this gloat would make Avery bow down in respect. That would not happen. Neither Avery nor Roger would ever fully concede a point. It always got near the finish line and then took another right turn towards a more obscure debate, forever trying to solve the eternal question of who knew movies better. Avery raked Roger over the ridicule coals as soon as Kurt exited. The Way We Were? You think that swashbuckler is gonna like The Way We Were? Avery smiled dismissively. Oh, Roger, you naive slut. His lady will love it. Happy wife means happy life. You have so much to learn, my little friend. This would lead to an ongoing debate that lasted the rest of the day into night about whether or not that Kurt would return as a happy customer. Little did these two cinephiles know that the three of them would be spending the rest of their lives together.
Bobby hit the road, he had a destination, but he left it all behind. Riding down the highway, feeling the vibrations, in the search of what he'd find. Drive on, drive on, feel the freedom in the wind.
And on the third day, Kurt returned. Videotapes were due back after 3 days before late charges reared their ugly heads. Anytime a new customer returned a video, Roger and Avery were giddy to see if their selection had been met with satisfaction. They took it personally when a customer was upset enough to admit dissatisfaction. So personally that they'd begun keeping score. Literally, they had a third notebook, which they shared and kept tucked underneath the cash register. Avery was currently losing by 2, one of which was still under heavy debate as to whether this customer could be classified as displeased. When Kurt walked in, both heads turned. They waited with bated breath to see what kind of face would be entering. Happy, sad, angry, disturbed. The face turned out to be neutral. This only intensified the anticipation. Avery was ecstatic. He was salivating at the possibility that Roger's selection had ticked him off. Roger was nervous. The store was crowded. It typically was on a Saturday afternoon. There were multiple returning customers who loved to get into a lively discussion with Roger and Avery. They fawned over their video clerks. It were these recurring customers that inflated Roger and Avery's egos to the point of feeling famous. Kurt walked right up to Roger, extended his videotape, and said, "You nailed it, amigo." Roger was beyond relieved. He fist-pumped and kicked out his foot. Avery was silently disgusted, turning around in shame to go restock the return movies. "What time you all closing?" 10 p.m., my good man." Kurt nodded as he put on his sunglasses. "All right then, maybe I'll swing back around to kick that can." "Looking forward to it." Kurt smiled, the right side of his lip rising while the left stayed still. He walked out as the hanging doorbell danced. Roger couldn't wait to gloat. Avery was going to have to hear it until they closed. Never pass up an opportunity to show your pristine cinematic prowess. The rest of the day went as most Saturdays do. A mix of love-struck couples on a date night looking for a late-night score, and horror aficionados looking for a late-night scare. As they got ready to close up, after which they would head to a local cinema to check out a new movie called The Thing, the doorbell danced. Without turning around, they both said, "Close, sorry." "Well, shoot, guess I missed the cut, huh?" They both turned. The voice was unmistakable. It was Kurt. Lowering his sunglasses, standing by the door, blocking the open sign which had now been turned to display the word "closed," Roger took the lead and told him, "The way we were. Hey man, we could squeeze you in real quick, but we gotta book it. Got tickets to a new flick tonight." Kurt took a couple steps forward as the spurs on his boots clicked and clacked. "Gentlemen, I was wondering if I could interest you in a little business venture." Roger and Avery looked at each other, puzzled, and then it dawned on them simultaneously. Avery took the lead this time. We dig chicks." "Yeah," Roger added. "No judging, though. Whatever gets your freak flag flying, my man." "Oh, no. This ain't that kind of business venture. You see, fellas, I was thinking about starting my own video store. And I was thinking that you two should run it with me." There was a sizable pause. Roger and Avery had dreamed of opening their own store. There had been somewhere between 10 and 100 conversations about what would make their video store the best video store in all of California, which one could then gauge as meaning it was the best video store in the world. They'd even pitched their idea to the owner of Video Village, Gary, telling him that Gary could be in on it with them. Gary placated them by saying it sounded like a great idea, but never went farther than that. Gary didn't want another store. Gary didn't even want this store. He had inherited the store from his father. And now, Roger and Avery were being asked what they had always dreamed of being asked. Run the show.
Driving down the Sylvan Road, the sun is shining bright. When the radio turned up loud, we're gonna drive all night. We're blowing through our hair, we pass behind. With every mile in free, it's all we'll ever need. In the middle of nowhere, with the setting sun, laughing and singing, we're on the run. These open roads are our home, yeah, we'll go till the morning comes.
The diner was almost empty. Kurt explained his idea. He was going to open up a video store in Malibu, a place where video was somehow an untapped resource. This was a wealthy area, the kind of place where your kink was just a phone call away and nobody would ask questions. The pitch was so good that Roger and Avery felt like they were actually in a movie. Late night discussion in a diner with some fella who felt pulled out of a classical western. This was exciting, beyond exciting. This was cinematic. They asked for details, aka the perks. Kurt obliged them. Profits would be split in thirds. Roger and Avery would work in the store, dealing with customers. They could each hire an apprentice, someone to work for them when they needed time off, for vacation, a hot date, or the new John Carpenter flick. Kurt knew how to sell. Roger and Avery were practically swimming, but there was a fairly big catch. All the boxes were checked, so there was just one question left to answer. So Roger asked it. "So, who picks the movies?" Kurt leaned back, grinning like a pig in excrement. "Oh, fellas, you do, of course." Roger and Avery smiled. They turned to each other, nodding. This was getting exciting. Except for the horror section. That's my bag. Their smiles quickly faded. Horror was their bag. Any true cinephile takes pride in horror. It was the last voyage of video. The provocative pictures that stayed tucked into corners. Elusive. Everything about horror was exciting to Roger and Avery. How could they not be in charge? Roger elaborated. Sort of. Well, Kurt, man, horror is like our bag, you know? Kurt lightly leaned forward. He seemed aware of his surroundings and wanted to keep this part of the conversation top secret. Fellas, when you see my selection, I think you'll agree. I got the goods.
Pull the windows down, hit the open road, feel the wind and the sunshine, let it explode. Thunder on the speakers, soul on the beat, kicking dust behind us, feet on the street. Drive all night, feel alive, set the wheels on fire, wild night. Drive all night.
They got a bar inside the car. This is what Avery yelled from the back window of the stretch limo as Roger stood outside his tiny apartment waiting to be scooped up. Avery was dangling his cocktail glass filled with ice, grinning from ear to ear. Roger lowered his sunglasses as he walked over, nodding in bliss. Far out, man. He opened the back door, excited, and exclaimed for Roger to get in. They were both wearing their snazziest Hawaiian shirts, the ones they save for Saturdays, when they really wanted to, as they put it, pop. The ride to Malibu from Manhattan Beach was about an hour. It flew by. Every minute felt like a second. They poured cocktails. They rolled the windows up and down. They tried to find the perfect radio station to capture the moment, always treating their life as a movie, which meant soundtracks were essential. The film experience is 50% audio, was a line they both used on customers on more than 100 occasions when trying to sell someone on a specific selection to rent. They had fulfilled their internal prophecies. Their cinematic knowledge had offered them a chance for advancement in the field of their choice, film fandom. It was paying off. Kurt had been specific about what he had hoped for them, but the store, the actual video store, he wanted it to be a surprise. He wanted Roger and Avery to feel as though they were walking into a theater. His last line was a beauty. Get your popcorn ready. It's gonna be a doozy.
A shadow lingers through the night. Whispers lost in pale moonlight. Warms echo with a lover's cry. In twilight dreams our hearts will die. When the stars won't shine, will you still be mine?
Cinema City. That was the sign. In big, bright pink letters. It felt glitzy and retro in one fell swoop. The cursive lettering could not have been more magnetic. Roger and Avery were in full swoon. The front door had a bright red light shining out of it that felt almost futuristic. On both sides of the entrance were movie posters, stacks and stacks of movie posters, yet none of them seemed recognizable from the car, even for the film fanatics walking towards them. As they got closer, they understood why they couldn't place any of them. They were fake. The titles and graphics looked smudged, as if someone had dumped a bucket of water on top of each one before they had been glossed. The closer they got to the store, the more these posters seemed to swim into each other. It was quite the sight, almost hypnotic, like a 3D painting. They'd pull you in until your face was nearly up against the glass, squinting to see what it was, which was in fact nothing. You couldn't even tell it was glass until your nose was nearly pressed on top of it. They did a slow 360 to embrace the moment, feel their surroundings. This was the only store on the street, this long, secluded street, which was directly across the street from the ocean. This was prime time real estate. They figured Kurt must have a little cash if he was serious about this venture. But to have a spot that was this hot, he must be loaded. They had so many questions. I bet you boys got some questions. They turned to see Kurt walking out of the front entrance. He had a white tuxedo. Avery took off his sunglasses to get a better view of the tuxedo and told him, "Yeah, just a couple, Kurt." Their eyes didn't know where to look. Kurt, the store, the posters, the driver, the beach. What was next? Kathleen Turner walking out of the waves? Kathleen Turner was waiting inside. Let's go give her a squeeze. That was twice in the span of 30 seconds that Kurt seemed to read their minds. He wasn't kidding about being a people person. The ultimate attribute for a salesman, knowing people. The store smelled like fresh popcorn. Talk about a warm welcome. For Roger and Avery, this was Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. The layout was pristine, 3 times the size of Video Village, yet it felt intimate. All the standard sections seemed to be coexisting nicely. Kurt meandered about the store as he let his 2 new colleagues get situated by looking through the collection of titles, awaiting their approval. Roger gave it to him first. Not bad, Kurt. Not bad at all, my man. You got a keen eye, all right? Avery jumped onto the positivity bandwagon next and told Kurt, Sergio Leone front and center. Nice touch, Kurt. That's a nice touch, Kurt. Nice touch indeed. Got your Charles Bronson keeping watch over the right? I like the symmetry, man. Really, cohesive. Roger and Avery were bopping and weaving through every aisle. They would find a beloved movie, say the title out loud, trying to get the attention of the other one, almost trying to outdo their opponent through quality of the film they found. Each new discovery seemed to stretch their smiles. They were blushing brighter than the Cinema City neon sign. And then, they saw it. The red line. Tucked into the corner of the store was a red line on the floor. 5 feet in front of the red line was a door, a black door that looked almost painted on the wall. It was so skinny, it almost looked like a hologram. Roger and Avery both turned. They waited. Kurt could surely be reading their mind once again, so they waited for him to say it. Gentlemen, that is the red line. Sinister grins invaded their skins as they both turned from the red line back to Kurt. They knew something cool was beyond the red line, through the black door. But what in fact was it? Kurt sashayed over towards them and took a seat at the stool near the cash register, which felt more like a bar. The guy who checked you out would not feel like a clerk. He would feel like a bartender. Just another cherry on the ever-expanding sundae that was Cinema City. Kurt got situated on his stool and told them what was in store for them through that door, past the red line. You may have noticed that one specific section has been omitted. There was a brief pause. It took them a second to actually realize what that was. Avery said it. Horror? Kurt slightly leaned back and finger gunned right between Avery's eyes. Bingo, buddy. That is what exists beyond the red line. Step through, if you dare. A theater with only 2 seats. It's got your names on them. Kurt wasn't kidding. The first seat had a silver plate labeled Roger. The second seat, directly next to it, had a silver plate labeled Avery. You had to hug the wall to get to your seat. Your designated name-plated seat. The width of this theater was roughly 5 feet. The length was closer to 10. Intimate? Intimate was an understatement. Roger and Avery took their seats. Directly in front of them was a little circular table with 2 bags of popcorn and 2 crackling Diet Cokes. Gentlemen, Roger and Avery turned around. Kurt was still standing by the red line entrance. It's time for me to bid adieu. Enjoy the show. Kurt winked and closed the door behind them. Roger and Avery turned to each other. Their chairs slowly reclined as the room lights softly shut off while the screen dissolved to white. There was an old-school countdown spinner counting backwards from 10 to 1. Cut to black. And then, a woman sitting alone in a coffee shop. Cut to that same woman being filmed without her knowledge as she walks down the city street. Cut to the same woman being filmed as she walks into her apartment building. Ambient natural noise and heavy breathing. That was the only audio in this film. Was it a film? It looked and felt like a documentary. The next scene was a hand emerging from next to the camera, off screen, knocking on a door. The woman who had been followed opens up the door, just enough to see her eyes, yet the chain lock remained intact, covering her nose. The voice behind the camera says that they have to inspect the apartment for a water leak, because the apartment directly below her has some minor flooding from the ceiling. She asks, why is this being recorded? He says nothing. She asks again, why is this being recorded? He responds by kicking open the door, breaking the chain lock, and sending this woman flying backwards into her apartment as he charges inside. Roger and Avery have half their faces covered with their opposing hands while beginning to slink into their seats. They continue to watch as sounds of a woman struggling, and then being beaten. As this man continues to make odd gargled moans, we can hear him foam from the lips. Until finally there is a loud thump, followed by the truly disturbing sounds of choking. Her life is being squeezed out of her, as the man filming appears to be approaching some sort of ecstasy. Cut to black. The red line lights turn on. Roger and Avery are frozen. The door behind them opens, letting in a stream of daylight that transports them back to reality. Kurt emerges in a silhouette asking, "How was the picture?" True terror. This is hard to achieve, especially when you've seen damn near every horror movie made over the past decade. Exploitation to the extreme. Roger and Avery were never affected. They had lost their nerve literally somewhere along the 1000th horror movie that they watched during their coming of cinematic age. They had so many more questions. They wanted to know everything. Not since the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre had a movie felt so real. Who directed it? Who was the actress? What was the budget? Did it ever get a release? Gentlemen, I would tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Kurt laughed in his machine gun timbre, puffing away in his fresh Cuban cigar. Roger was rapid-fire nodding in pure joy as he paced around the romance section. So let me get this straight. Redline is like a VIP section, but just for horror? Cue the finger gun salute as Kurt told him. Bingo, buddy. Roger finally stopped pacing. He was blushing so hard he could barely make eye contact. Kurt, man, I gotta say, that is a killer concept, man. Killer. I'm sweating, dude. Look at my shirt. It's like drenched, all right? The giggles were all-consuming as Kurt watched his new colleague stand in pure delight. He sat down his fresh Cuban and extended both hands. Gentlemen, do we have ourselves a deal? They could barely contain themselves as they simultaneously shook his hands. Kurt popped a bottle of champagne and they spent the next hour gushing about the store, the red line, the movie, the ambiance. Everything had been tailor-made for them. This was their movie heaven come to life. When the delight dust briefly began to settle, Avery had to ask, out of sheer curiosity. Hey, Kurt, man, how many of those kind of movies do you got that feel real, you know?
Best left unsaid, Avery.
Remember, horror is my bag. Kurt winked and smiled. Roger sarcastically followed that up with his own question. It's not real, right? I'd hate to be aiding and abetting a murder, all right? Kurt answered his question with a question of his own. Did it feel real? They both nodded. Well then, Kurt said, if it feels real, don't that make it so?
We rise from the ashes, strong. The weight of the world we bear on. With stars on our hearts, our stories unfold. The price of ambition is a deal that's been sold. We are the chosen ones, shining in the night, bound by our struggles, fighting for the heroes of the lost, in shadows we dwell. We've conquered the fears, but we'll pay the toll. Chained to our fate, yet we still have our souls. We are the chosen ones, shining in the night, bound by our struggles, fighting for the light. Through darkness we rise, with fate intertwined, a power